The bridal suite at the Del Rio Hotel smelled of lavender and broken promises, and Catherine Harper knew with a certainty that carved through her chest that something had gone terribly wrong. 3 days she had waited in this dusty Texas border town, her wedding dress hanging like a ghost against the wardrobe door, the September heat of 1882 pressing through the windows with merciless insistence. The other guests had long since departed, their pitying glances following her through the hotel lobby each morning as she descended the stairs in another carefully chosen day dress, pretending she still believed Philip Thornton would arrive with a reasonable explanation and an apologetic smile. Catherine stood at the window now, watching the Rio Grande shimmer in the distance beyond the main street of Del Rio, her fingers twisted in the lace curtains her landlady had assured her were the finest in West Texas. The town sprawled before her in shades of brown and dust. Adobe buildings clustered together as if seeking protection from the vast emptiness surrounding them. Across the street, the general store was closing for the evening, Mr. Patterson pulling down the canvas awning while his wife swept the boardwalk. Normal life continuing as though Catherine's world had not fractured into incomprehensible pieces. She had traveled all the way from St. Louis, her trunks packed with everything she owned, her heart full of cautious optimism about this marriage her father had arranged. Philip was a businessman, her father had assured her, establishing lucrative cattle contracts throughout Texas. A man of means and respectability, even if they had only met twice before the engagement was finalized. Catherine had told herself that affection could grow with time, that partnership and mutual respect formed the foundation of successful marriages. She was 23 years old, practical by nature, and willing to make the best of the opportunity before her. But Philip had not come. No telegram, no letter, no messenger with explanations. Nothing but silence and the growing realization that she had been abandoned in a town where she knew no one, with dwindling funds and no clear path forward. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Catherine pressed a hand to her bodice, steadying her breath before crossing the small room. When she opened the door, Mrs. Delgado stood in the hallway, her round face creased with concern. "Miss Harper, there is a gentleman downstairs asking to speak with you. He says he has information about Mr. Thornton." Catherine's heart lurched. "Is it Philip? Has he finally arrived?" "Mrs." Delgado shook her head slowly. "No, miss. It is someone else. A cowboy by the look of him. He is waiting in the parlor." Catherine followed the older woman down the narrow staircase, her mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps Philip had sent an employee, a ranch hand with a message explaining the delay. Perhaps there had been an accident, illness, some catastrophic event that had prevented his arrival. As much as the abandonment hurt, a part of her almost hoped for tragedy because at least that would make sense of the inexplicable silence. The hotel parlor was a modest room, with worn furniture and faded wallpaper depicting pastoral scenes that seemed absurd in this desert landscape. A man stood near the window, hat in his hands, his back to her as she entered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty denim trousers and a work shirt that had seen better days. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, Catherine found herself looking into eyes the color of the Texas sky just before sunset, somewhere between blue and gray, set in a sun-weathered face that might have been anywhere from 25 to 35 years old. "Miss Harper?" His voice was deep and careful, as though he was weighing each word before speaking it. "My name is Ryder Garrett. I work for the Double T Ranch, about 40 miles northeast of here. I apologize for disturbing you, but I felt you deserved to know the truth about Philip Thornton." Catherine remained standing, her hands clasped in front of her. "Do you know where he is? Why he has not come?" Ryder Garrett shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "May I speak plainly, Miss Harper? What I have to say is not pleasant, and I wish to God I did not have to be the one to tell you. Please." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Whatever the truth is, I would rather know it than continue in this uncertainty." He nodded, respect flickering across his features. "Philip Thornton was killed 6 days ago. Shot in a card game in Eagle Pass. The man who killed him claimed self-defense, said Thornton pulled a derringer first. Given Thornton's reputation around these parts, most folks believe the story." The room tilted slightly and Catherine reached for the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. Dead. Philip was dead, had been dead, even as she sat in this hotel waiting for him, arranging and rearranging the items in her room to pass the endless hours. She had been waiting for a ghost, I do not understand, she said slowly. Why did no one inform me? Surely someone knew I was here, waiting for him. Ryder's jaw tightened. That is the other part of the story, Miss Harper, and it is the part that made me ride 2 days to find you. I was in Eagle Pass when it happened, selling horses for my boss. I heard men talking in the saloon after the shooting. Turns out Thornton never intended to marry you at all. Catherine stared at him, unable to process the words. What? It was a scheme. Thornton made arrangements with your father for a substantial dowry, claimed he needed it to finalize some cattle contracts. Once he received the money, he planned to send you a telegram saying he had reconsidered the engagement. By then, you would be in Texas and your father would be out the money. Thornton had done this before, at least twice that I heard of. He was a confidence man, Miss Harper. I am sorry. The words landed like physical blows. Catherine felt heat rise to her face, a mixture of humiliation and fury that made her vision blur. Her father, always so concerned with business and appearances, had been duped completely, and she had been the pawn in the scheme, shipped across the country to legitimize the con. Thank you for telling me, Mr. Garrett. She was amazed at how calm her voice sounded. I appreciate you riding so far to deliver this news. Ryder did not move toward the door. Instead, he studied her with those steady eyes, and Catherine had the uncomfortable feeling that he saw more than she wanted to reveal. Miss Harper, forgive me for asking, but what will you do now? Do you have family you can return to? That is not your concern, Mr. Garrett. You have fulfilled your duty in informing me of Mr. Thornton's death. I will manage from here. It is just that I heard some of what Thornton said before he died. He was boasting about his successes, including you. He mentioned that your father had passed away last spring, that you had no brothers, no close male relatives to make trouble for him. I wanted to make sure you had somewhere safe to go. Catherine felt the last of her composure cracking. My father died in April. My aunt, who I was living with, made it clear she could no longer house me. That is why the marriage arrangement was made so quickly. Philip communicated with my father's business partner, who was managing the estate. I have no one. Mr. Garrett, I have nothing except what is in my trunks upstairs and approximately $40 remaining after paying for this room and my meals. So, yes, I appreciate your concern, but unless you have a solution to offer, I would prefer to face my situation privately. She turned away from him, mortified to feel tears burning behind her eyes. She would not cry in front of this stranger, this cowboy who had ridden out of nowhere to shatter what remained of her illusions. I might have a solution, actually. Ryder's voice was quiet. It is not a conventional one, and you have every right to tell me to go to hell for suggesting it. But hear me out before you decide. Catherine turned back slowly, surprised by the earnestness in his expression. I am listening. The Double T Ranch where I work is owned by Thomas and Martha Graham. Good people, honest as the day is long. Martha has been looking for help for months now. Her health is not what it was, and running the household is getting too much for her. They have 3 daughters still at home, ages 16 down to 11, and they could use instruction in the finer points of education and deportment. Martha mentioned just last week that she wished she could find a proper lady to help manage the home and teach the girls. I was thinking you might be suited for the position. You are offering me employment? Catherine was not sure whether to be offended or relieved. I am offering you an option. The pay would not be much, maybe $25 a month plus room and board. But you would be safe, and you would have time to figure out your next steps. Martha Graham is a kind woman. She would treat you fairly. Catherine walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street, pride warred with practicality in her chest. She had been raised in a comfortable home in St. Louis, educated at a respectable academy, trained to manage a household and host social gatherings. The idea of becoming a hired servant, even one called a governess or housekeeper, stung deeply. But the alternative was worse. $40 would not get her back to St. Louis, and even if it did, she had no home to return to. Her father's business partner had made it clear that the estate was mortgaged to the hilt, and there was nothing left for her. Why are you doing this, Mr. Garrett? She kept her gaze on the street. You do not know me. Why would you ride 2 days out of your way to help a stranger? There was a long pause before he answered. I had a sister once. She was in a bad situation, needed help, and no one stepped forward. By the time I found out and came for her, it was too late. She had made choices out of desperation that destroyed her life. I swore then that if I ever saw another woman in trouble, I would do what I could. I know it is not much, and I know you probably think this is some kind of trick after what Thornton did, but I swear to you on my sister's memory, this is a genuine offer. The Grahams need help, and you need a place. It is just practical." Catherine turned to face him, searching his expression for deception or ulterior motives. All she saw was sincerity, and a kind of weary sadness that suggested he had seen too much of the world's cruelty. Against her better judgment, she found herself believing him. "When would I start?" she asked quietly. Relief washed over Ryder's face. "I need to head back tomorrow morning. If you are willing to travel by wagon, you could come with me. It is a hard 2-day journey, but I will make sure you are safe and comfortable as possible." Catherine thought of the wedding dress still hanging in her room upstairs, the hope she had carried with her from St. Louis, now transformed into something else entirely. She was not the woman who had arrived in Del Rio 3 days ago, and perhaps that was not entirely a bad thing. "I will be ready at dawn, Mr. Garrett." The journey to the Double T Ranch was indeed hard, the wagon bumping over rutted roads that cut through endless stretches of scrubland, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. Ryder had loaded Catherine's trunks into the wagon bed with easy strength, arranging them so she could sit on one and lean against another, cushioned with blankets he produced from somewhere. He drove the wagon team with quiet competence, his attention focused on the road ahead. For the first several hours, they traveled in silence. Catherine was grateful for it, her mind still churning through the revelations of the previous evening. She kept returning to her father's face the last time she had seen him, pale and drawn in his sickbed, insisting she read the letters from Philip Thornton. Had her father truly believed the marriage would be legitimate, or had he suspected something was wrong, but been too desperate to secure her future to examine the situation too closely? "There is a creek about a mile ahead," Ryder said, breaking into her thoughts. "We can stop there for lunch if you like. Let the horses rest." "That would be fine, thank you." The creek was little more than a trickle between sandy banks, but cottonwood trees provided blessed shade. Ryder helped Catherine down from the wagon, his hands steady on her waist, releasing her the moment her feet touched the ground. He tended to the horses while she stretched her cramped muscles, grateful to be standing. "I have bread, cheese, and some dried beef," Ryder said, pulling a bundle from under the wagon seat. "Not fancy, but it will keep us going." They sat on a fallen log near the water, eating in companionable quiet. Catherine watched Ryder from the corner of her eye, trying to understand this man who had disrupted her life in such a strange way. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of someone who worked hard for his living. His profile was strong, almost stern, but when he glanced at her and caught her looking, something softened in his expression. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Garrett?" "Ryder is fine, and yes, you can ask." "What did you mean last night about it being too late for your sister? What happened to her?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he would not answer. Then he let out a long breath. "Her name was Sarah. She was 2 years younger than me. After our parents died, we got separated. I went to work on a ranch in Oklahoma, and she ended up with a family in San Antonio. They promised to care for her, but they treated her more like a servant. When she was 17, she ran away with a man who said he would marry her. He did not. Instead, he sold her to a brothel in Galveston. By the time I tracked her down, she had been there for 6 months. She was using laudanum to cope with the life, and she was so far gone into the addiction that I could not pull her back. She died of an overdose 3 weeks after I found her. She was 19 years old. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I am so sorry, Ryder. That is a terrible burden to carry. I should have found her sooner, should have done more to keep track of her after our parents died. I was young and stupid, thought only about my own survival. By the time I realized she might be in trouble, it was too late. You cannot blame yourself for what happened to her. You were young yourself, and you did not abandon her intentionally." He shook his head. "Maybe not. But I learned that intentions do not matter much when people are suffering. What matters is action. That is why when I heard about you, sitting alone in that hotel, abandoned by a dead con man, I knew I had to do something. I could not save Sarah, but maybe I could help you avoid a similar fate." Catherine reached out and touched his arm gently. "You have helped me, Ryder, more than you know. I will be forever grateful for your kindness." He looked at her hand on his arm, and something flickered in his eyes, something warm and cautious. "You are not what I expected, Miss Harper. Catherine, and what did you expect? I do not know. Someone more fragile, maybe. Someone who would fall apart when faced with bad news. But you have steel in you. I can see it. I have had to develop steel. When my mother died, I was 15. I learned to run the household for my father, to manage servants and social obligations, all while grieving. When my father died, I thought I had used up all my capacity for survival, but apparently there is more in me than I realized. That is good. Ryder stood, offering her his hand. You will need that steel at the ranch. Martha Graham is wonderful, but ranch life is not easy. It is beautiful in its own way, but it is hard work and long days. Catherine took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. I am not afraid of hard work, Ryder. What I'm afraid of is being useless and dependent. At least at your ranch, I will have purpose. They made camp that night near a dry riverbed. The sky above them, a vast canvas of stars unlike anything Catherine had seen in St. Louis. Ryder built a fire and made coffee strong enough to strip paint, Catherine thought. But she drank it gratefully as the desert temperature dropped with startling speed. He had given her all the blankets, insisting he was used to sleeping rough, and created a sheltered spot for her near the wagon where she could have some privacy. Ryder, she said, as he prepared to settle on the opposite side of the fire, tell me about the Graham family. What should I expect? He poured himself more coffee, considering. Thomas Graham is a fair man, a good rancher. He came out here 20 years ago with nothing and built the Double T from the ground up. Martha is his second wife. His first wife died in childbirth along with the baby. That was about 15 years ago. Martha came from Louisiana, a widow with a young son. She and Thomas married, and they had the 3 girls together. The oldest, Elizabeth, is 16 and thinks she knows everything. Mary is 13 and quiet as a mouse. The youngest is Eleanor, and she is a whirlwind of energy. Then there is Martha's son from her first marriage, Daniel. He is 28, works as the ranch foreman. What about the other ranch hands? How many are there? Usually about 6 or 7, depending on the season. Right now we have 5, besides Daniel and me. They are decent men. Most of them. We do not tolerate troublemakers. Thomas runs a clean operation. And what is your role? You said you were selling horses in Eagle Pass. I break and train horses. The Double T breeds some of the finest quarter horses in Texas. I have a way with them. Always have. I also help with the cattle when needed, whatever Thomas requires. Catherine wrapped her blanket more tightly around her shoulders. Do you ever think about doing something else? Owning your own ranch, perhaps? Ryder was quiet for a long moment. I used to think about it. Saved up some money toward buying land. But after Sarah died, I lost the taste for big dreams. It seemed wrong somehow to reach for something better when she would never have that chance. Thomas and Martha have been good to me. I have a place there, work that matters. That is enough. It is not wrong to want a future, Ryder. Your sister would not want you to stop living because she could not. He looked at her across the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames. Maybe, but wanting something and believing you deserve it are 2 different things. Catherine understood that sentiment more than she wanted to admit. She settled into her blankets, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant calls of coyotes. Despite the uncertainty of her situation, she felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in weeks, she was not waiting for something that would never come. She was moving forward, even if she did not know exactly where that movement would lead. The Double T Ranch appeared in the distance near midday on the second day of travel, a collection of buildings clustered around a main house that was larger than Catherine had expected. The house was built of stone and wood, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. Corrals and outbuildings spread out behind it, and she could see horses grazing in nearby pastures. It was rustic but well-maintained, speaking to the success Thomas Graham had achieved. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple calico dress and an apron. Her face lit up when she saw Ryder. Ryder Garrett, you are back sooner than we expected. Did you have trouble selling the horses? No, madam, sold them all at a good price. Ryder brought the wagon to a stop and jumped down. But I brought something better than money. Mrs. Graham, may I present Miss Catherine Harper? Catherine, this is Martha Graham. Martha's eyes widened as she took in Catherine sitting in the wagon. A guest? Oh my, Ryder, you should have sent word ahead. The house is a disaster, and I look like something the cat dragged in. Mrs. Graham, Miss Harper is not a guest. She is someone I thought might be able to help you with the household and the girls. I know you have been looking for assistance, and Miss Harper finds herself in need of a position. I thought you two might be able to help each other." Ryder helped Catherine down from the wagon as Martha approached, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Miss Harper, forgive me for being blunt, but you do not look like someone who needs domestic work. That is a very fine dress you are wearing." Catherine smoothed her skirt self-consciously. "Appearances can be deceiving, Mrs. Graham. I find myself in unexpected circumstances, and Mr. Garrett was kind enough to suggest this position. I am capable of managing a household, teaching children, and generally making myself useful. If you are willing to give me a trial period, I promise you will not be disappointed." Martha looked between Catherine and Ryder, clearly trying to piece together the story. Then she smiled, and her whole face transformed with warmth. "Well, I have learned to trust Ryder's judgment about most things. Come inside out of this heat, and we will talk properly. Ryder, have one of the boys bring Miss Harper's trunks to the spare room upstairs." The inside of the house was cooler, with thick walls and windows positioned to catch the cross breeze. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a large kitchen visible through an open doorway. The furniture was sturdy and practical, the decorations minimal but tasteful. It was the home of people who worked too hard to worry much about appearances, but who took pride in what they had built. Martha settled Catherine at the kitchen table and poured them both glasses of cool water from a pitcher kept in the cellar. "Now then, Miss Harper, why do you not tell me the real story of how you ended up in Ryder Garrett's wagon?" Catherine appreciated the direct approach. She told Martha an abbreviated version of the truth, leaving out the most humiliating details, but being honest about Philip Thornton's death and the failed marriage arrangement. Martha listened without interrupting, her expression growing more sympathetic as the story unfolded. "That is a terrible thing to happen to anyone," Martha said when Catherine finished. "Philip Thornton was a snake, and I am not sorry he is dead, though I am sorry for the trouble it caused you. As for your situation, I would be grateful for your help, Miss Harper, truly grateful. Running this house is getting beyond me, and my girls are at ages where they need more refined instruction than I can provide. I was raised on a plantation in Louisiana, but I spent most of my time in the kitchens with the house servants rather than in the parlor with my mother. I can teach my daughters to work hard and to be good people, but I cannot teach them how to be ladies. Can you do that?" "Yes," Catherine said simply. "I can do that. Then we have an arrangement. $25 a month, room and board, Sundays off unless there is an emergency. The room upstairs is yours for as long as you want it. Fair?" "More than fair. Thank you, Mrs. Graham." Martha patted her hand. "Call me Martha. Dear, we do not stand much on formality around here. Now, let me introduce you to the chaos that is my family." The 3 Graham daughters were indeed as Ryder had described them. Elizabeth was tall and pretty, with her father's blonde hair and her mother's dark eyes, currently in that awkward stage between girlhood and womanhood, where she seemed uncertain whether to be gracious or sullen. Mary was quieter, with brown hair in braids and a book clutched to her chest like a shield. Eleanor was a bundle of energy with tangled hair and a dirty face, having apparently been helping with something in the barn. "Girls, this is Miss Harper. She will be staying with us to help manage the household and continue your education." Elizabeth crossed her arms. "We do not need a governess. We are practically grown. You are 16, Elizabeth, which means you are barely more than a child, regardless of what you think. Miss Harper is here to help all of us, including me. You will treat her with respect and courtesy, or you will answer to your father. Is that clear?" Something in Martha's tone left no room for argument. Elizabeth subsided with a pout, but she nodded. Mary looked at Catherine with shy interest, while Eleanor bounced on her toes. "Can you teach us to dance?" Eleanor asked. "Mama says there will be a harvest social in October, and I want to know how to do a real waltz." Catherine smiled despite her exhaustion. "I can teach you to dance. I can teach you many things if you are willing to learn." Over the following days, Catherine settled into life at the Double T Ranch with a strange sense of relief. The work was indeed hard, much harder than anything she had done in St. Louis. She rose before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent the morning working with the girls on their lessons, devoted the afternoon to household tasks, and collapsed into bed each night too tired to dwell on her lost future. But there was a rhythm to it that she found comforting, Unlike the endless waiting in Del Rio, every day at the ranch had purpose and structure. She knew what was expected of her, and could see the results of her labor in everything from the improved organization of the pantry to the way Mary was beginning to open up during their reading sessions. Ryder was a constant presence, though he seemed to go out of his way to maintain a respectful distance. She would see him working with the horses in the corral, his movements patient and sure as he gentled a skittish yearling. She would hear his voice in the morning darkness as the ranch hands gathered for their assignments. Sometimes at dinner, served family style at the long table in the main room, she would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite interpret. Thomas Graham turned out to be a man of few words but deep integrity. He was a big man, weathered by years in the sun, with kind eyes and a slow smile. He thanked Catherine gravely for helping his wife and daughters, treating her as a valued employee rather than a servant. His stepson Daniel was more complicated, a brooding presence with his mother's dark coloring and a tendency toward moods. He was polite enough to Catherine but distant, as though he resented any changes to the household routine. It was Ryder, though, who occupied more and more of Catherine's thoughts as the weeks passed. She told herself it was simple gratitude that anyone would feel warmly toward someone who had helped them in a desperate moment. But she found herself listening for his voice, watching for him when she hung laundry in the yard, feeling a flutter in her chest when he smiled at something Eleanor said during dinner. One evening in early October, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Catherine was standing on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air had finally started to cool with autumn's approach, and she wore a shawl over her dress. She heard the porch boards creak and turned to find Ryder approaching, his hat in his hands. "Evening, Catherine. Mind if I join you?" "Please do." They stood side by side, watching the light fade across the rangeland. In the corral, horses moved like shadows against the twilight. "You have done well here," Ryder said quietly. "Martha says she does not know how she managed before you came. The girls are more settled too. Even Elizabeth has stopped sulking most of the time. It is good work, meaningful work. I am grateful you thought of bringing me here. Are you happy, though? That is different from grateful." Catherine considered the question seriously. "I do not know if happiness is something I am ready for yet. But I am content, and that is more than I expected when I was sitting in that hotel room in Del Rio. What about you, Ryder? Are you happy?" He was quiet for a long time. "I am happier than I have been in years, and that is directly related to you being here." Her heart began to beat faster. "Ryder, what are you saying?" He turned to face her, and in the fading light, his eyes were very serious. "I am saying that I have been thinking about you constantly since the moment I saw you in that parlor. I am saying that watching you laugh with the girls, or help Martha with the cooking, or read on the porch in the evening, has made me remember what it feels like to want a future. I am saying that I am falling in love with you, Catherine Harper, and I do not know what to do about it." Catherine felt as though all the air had been pressed from her lungs. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and resilient. I know you are kind to people who have earned your kindness, and honest even when the truth is painful. I know you fit into this place like you were always meant to be here. I know that when I think about the rest of my life, I cannot imagine it without you in it." She wanted to step closer to him, to close the distance between them, but fear held her in place. 3 weeks ago, I was supposed to marry another man. 3 weeks ago, I thought my life would be completely different. How can I trust my feelings about anything right now? I am not asking you to trust your feelings yet. I am just asking you to know what mine are. I am here, Catherine. I am not going anywhere. However long it takes for you to heal from what Thornton did, however long you need to figure out what you want, I will be here. That is a promise. Catherine felt tears slide down her cheeks. Why? Why would you promise something like that? You could find someone else, someone without so much baggage and confusion. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I do not want anyone else. I want you, the real you, baggage and confusion and all. I have spent 5 years telling myself I did not deserve happiness after what happened to Sarah. But then, you came along, and I started thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe we both deserve another chance. Before she could think better of it, Catherine stepped forward and rested her head against his chest. His arms came around her immediately, strong and sure, and she let herself be held. It was not romantic in the way she had imagined romance would be. It was better. It was real and solid and warm, and it felt like coming home after a long journey through hostile territory. "I am scared," she whispered against his shirt. "I know, I am scared too, but we can be scared together." They stood like that as the stars began to appear, holding each other while the ranch settled into evening quiet around them. Catherine did not know what the future would bring, but for the first time since her father died, she felt like she might have a future worth anticipating. The harvest social was held in the town of Del Rio at the end of October, the entire community gathering in the largest barn for music, dancing, and the kind of socializing that happened too infrequently in the scattered ranching communities. Martha had insisted on making Catherine a new dress for the occasion, a lovely blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. The Graham daughters were beside themselves with excitement, especially Eleanor, who had been practicing her waltz steps with Catherine every evening. Ryder drove one of the wagons, with Catherine beside him on the seat and the girls chattering in the back. Thomas and Martha followed in the other wagon with Daniel. The evening air was cool and pleasant, the sky still holding the last light of sunset as they reached town. The barn had been decorated with paper lanterns and autumn leaves, the floor swept clean for dancing. A group of musicians was already playing fiddle and guitar in the corner, and tables laden with food lined one wall. Catherine recognized several people from the town, including Mrs. Delgado from the hotel, who came over immediately to greet her. "Miss Harper, how wonderful to see you looking so well. I heard you found a position at the Double T Ranch. I am so glad things worked out for you." "Thank you, Mrs. Delgado. I am very fortunate." The older woman glanced at Ryder, who stood protectively near Catherine's elbow, and a knowing smile crossed her face. "Yes, I can see that. Very fortunate indeed." The evening unfolded in a whirl of music and laughter. Catherine danced with Thomas Graham first, his formal courtesy making her smile. Then she danced with several other ranchers and townsmen, all curious about the new arrival at the Double T. She watched Martha teaching the girls how to interact with potential dance partners, Elizabeth trying very hard to appear sophisticated, while Mary hung back shyly, and Eleanor simply enjoyed the music. But it was the dance with Ryder that mattered. He appeared at her side as a waltz began, offering his hand with mock solemnity. "Miss Harper, may I have this dance?" "You may, Mr. Garrett." He led her onto the floor, and suddenly they were spinning together, his hand firm on her waist. Their movements synchronized as though they had been dancing together for years. Catherine looked up at him and saw her own happiness reflected in his eyes. "You are a good dancer," she said, surprised. "My mother insisted her children learn properly, even if we were poor as church mice. She said dancing was one of the few pleasures in life that cost nothing but time and effort. Your mother was wise." "She was. She would have liked you." They danced in comfortable silence for a moment, and Catherine was aware of people watching them, the speculation in their glances. Let them speculate, she thought. Let them wonder. For the first time in her adult life, she was not living according to anyone else's expectations or plans. She was simply Catherine Harper, dancing with a man who made her feel seen and valued and safe. "What are you thinking?" Ryder asked, reading something in her expression. "I am thinking that I am glad I came to Texas. Even with everything that went wrong, I am glad." "Because of the ranch?" She met his eyes steadily. "Because of you." His hand tightened on her waist. "Catherine, I need to ask you something." "Ask." "I know it has not been long. I know you need more time, and I am willing to wait as long as necessary. But I need to know if there is a chance for us, a real chance. Because if there is, I want to start saving money again, start planning for a future. I want to buy some land, build a house, maybe start breeding horses seriously. But only if you might consider sharing that future with me someday." Catherine felt the last of her fear dissolve. She had been so afraid to trust again, so convinced that hope would only lead to more pain. But Ryder was not Philip Thornton. He had proven his character over and over in the past 2 months, in 1,000 small actions and kindnesses. He had asked for nothing in return for helping her, had maintained respectful boundaries while making his feelings clear, had shown her through his behavior exactly the kind of man he was. "There is a chance," she said softly. "More than a chance. I love you, Ryder. I think I have loved you since you stood in that hotel parlor and told me the truth, even though it was hard. I love your honesty and your kindness, and the way you are gentle with the horses and patient with Eleanor's endless questions. I love who I am when I am with you, so yes, there is absolutely a chance for us. He stopped dancing right there in the middle of the floor, with couples spinning around them, and cupped her face in his hands. "Say that again. I love you. I love you too, Catherine, more than I can properly express." He leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and the barn erupted in applause and cheering. When they pulled apart, both laughing and embarrassed, Catherine saw Martha Graham standing at the edge of the dance floor, with tears streaming down her face and a huge smile on her lips. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and good wishes. Apparently, their courtship had been the subject of much speculation and approval among the ranch community. Thomas shook Ryder's hand with gruff affection. Martha hugged Catherine tight enough to crack ribs, and the girls were absolutely delighted at the prospect of Catherine becoming a permanent part of their lives. On the drive back to the ranch, Catherine sat close to Ryder on the wagon seat, his arm around her shoulders. The girls had finally worn themselves out and dozed in the back, wrapped in blankets against the cooling night air. "When do you want to get married?" Ryder asked quietly. Catherine considered. "Soon, but not too soon. I want to do it right this time. I want a wedding that means something, not an arrangement made out of desperation." "How about Christmas? That gives us 2 months to plan and save. We could have the ceremony at the ranch, invite everyone we care about, start the new year as husband and wife." "Christmas sounds perfect." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I promise you, Catherine, I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I already know I will not regret it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Ryder Garrett. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with planning and preparation. Ryder worked extra hours breaking horses to sell, determined to have enough money to buy the supplies they would need to start their life together. Thomas Graham, in a gesture of extraordinary generosity, offered to deed them 20 acres of ranch land on the southern border of the property, along with enough building materials to start a house. "You have been like a son to me, Ryder," Thomas said gruffly, "and Catherine has brought new life to this household. This is not charity. It is family taking care of family." Martha enlisted Catherine's help in sewing her wedding dress, a cream-colored wool dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, practical enough to wear again, but beautiful enough to feel special. The girls were going to serve as witnesses and help with the reception afterward. Catherine wrote to her father's business partner in St. Louis, informing him of her upcoming marriage. To her surprise, she received a letter back, saying that the estate had finally been settled and there was a small inheritance for her, about $300. It was not a fortune, but combined with Ryder's savings, it was enough to buy furniture, tools, livestock, and everything else they would need. In early December, Ryder took Catherine to see the land Thomas had given them. They rode out on horseback, Catherine having learned to ride competently in her months at the ranch. The land was beautiful in the way that West Texas could be beautiful, all open sky and rolling scrubland, with a creek running through the middle. "The house will go there," Ryder said, pointing to a rise that offered a view in all directions. 2 rooms to start, with a loft. We can add on as we need to. The creek means we will have water year-round for the animals and a garden. There is good grazing, enough to support a decent herd of horses. Catherine tried to picture it, their future taking shape on this empty land. "It will be hard work, starting from nothing." "Yes, it will be, but we will be doing it together, and that makes all the difference." She turned to him, this man who had become her whole world. "I was supposed to marry someone else. I was supposed to live a completely different life, but I would not change anything that brought me here to you. Even the pain, even Thornton's betrayal, even that, because it taught me what I truly need, not comfort or security or social position, just someone who sees me and chooses me and shows up every single day. You do that. Ryder, you show up." He dismounted and helped her down, then pulled her into his arms. "I will keep showing up for the rest of our lives. That is my vow to you." The wedding took place on Christmas Day, the ranch house decorated with evergreen boughs and holly berries that Martha and the girls had gathered from the creek banks. A preacher from Del Rio performed the ceremony in the main room, with about 30 people crowded in to witness the event. Catherine wore her cream wool dress with her hair arranged in soft curls, a simple gold locket that had been her mother's as her only jewelry. Ryder wore a new suit, black wool with a white shirt, looking so handsome that Catherine's breath caught when she saw him waiting for her. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed her thoroughly, to the delight of the assembled guests. Then the furniture was pushed back, the fiddler started playing, and the celebration began. Catherine danced with everyone, from Thomas Graham to old Mr. Patterson from the general store. But it was the dances with Ryder that she treasured, spinning in his arms, her husband's arms, feeling the solid reality of this new life they were building together. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Ryder drew her outside onto the porch. The night was cold but clear, stars brilliant overhead. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and held her close. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I knew was possible. You?" "Beyond happy. I keep thinking about the day I rode into Del Rio to find you. What if I had not heard those men talking in Eagle Pass? What if I had decided it was not my business and rode straight back to the ranch? We would never have met. But you did ride to find me. You chose to help a stranger, and that says everything about who you are." She turned in his arms to face him. "I have something to tell you, and I want to say it now, on our wedding day, so it is part of the beginning of our marriage." He looked concerned. "What is it?" "When I was waiting in that hotel room for Philip Thornton, I felt completely powerless. My life was being determined by other people's choices and plans. But from the moment you walked into that parlor and told me the truth, I started taking my life back. Every choice since then has been mine. Coming to the ranch, falling in love with you, saying yes to this marriage. These were all my choices, made with full knowledge and free will. You gave me back my agency, Ryder. You gave me back myself. That is a gift I can never repay." His eyes were suspiciously bright. "You do not need to repay it, Catherine. Just be happy. Build this life with me. That is all I want." "Then that is what we will do." They stood together on the porch, the sound of celebration drifting out from the house behind them, and Catherine thought about the journey that had brought her here. The grief and the humiliation, the fear and the uncertainty had all been real. But so was this happiness, this love, this future spreading out before them, full of possibility. They spent their wedding night in a room Thomas and Martha had prepared for them, the privacy precious after months of living in a busy household. In the morning, they would begin the work of building their own home, their own life. But for now, wrapped in each other's arms, Catherine felt the last pieces of her broken heart knit back together, made stronger in the mending. The house took shape slowly over the winter and spring of 1883. Ryder worked on it whenever he could spare time from his duties at the Double T, and Catherine helped when weather permitted, learning to swing a hammer and mix mortar. Other ranch hands contributed labor, and neighbors stopped by to help with the heavy work of raising walls and installing roof beams. It became a community project. Everyone invested in seeing the young couple succeed. By April, the house was habitable, 2 large rooms and a loft, with real glass windows and a stone fireplace that Ryder built himself. Catherine cried when she walked into it for the first time, as a finished dwelling, overwhelmed by the reality of having a home that was truly theirs. They moved in with very little, but Catherine was skilled at making a house welcoming. She sewed curtains from fabric Martha helped her buy in Del Rio, arranged their few pieces of furniture to maximize the space, and planted a garden outside with vegetables and herbs. Ryder built corrals and a small barn, then began the serious work of breeding and training horses. Life was hard. There were days when Catherine's back ached from hauling water and scrubbing floors and tending the garden. There were nights when Ryder came home exhausted from breaking a particularly difficult horse or dealing with a problem in the herd. Money was tight, every dollar carefully considered before being spent. But there was joy too, the deep satisfaction of building something from nothing. Catherine learned to ride well enough to help Ryder move horses between pastures. She learned to treat minor injuries in animals and to identify which plants were edible and which were poisonous. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal patterns of work and weather. Ryder proved to be exactly the husband she had hoped for, steady and affectionate and fully present. He made her laugh with dry observations about their animals' personalities. He held her through the occasional nightmare about being abandoned in Del Rio. He talked to her about his plans and dreams, treating her as a full partner rather than a subordinate. In October of 1883, almost exactly a year after the harvest social, where they had declared their love, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction, despite knowing he wanted children, his face transformed with wonder. "A baby? We are going to have a baby." "Yes, sometime in late May, I think." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. Then he set her down gently, suddenly worried. Should you be working so hard? Should you be riding horses? Ryder, I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been doing hard work while pregnant since the beginning of time. I will be fine. But he insisted on taking over the heaviest chores, and Martha came by regularly to check on Catherine and offer advice. The Graham girls were thrilled at the prospect of a baby to dote on, and even Daniel unbent enough to congratulate them gruffly. The baby was born in late May as predicted, a difficult labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. Martha and the midwife from Del Rio attended Catherine while Ryder paced anxiously outside. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst through the door, desperate to make sure Catherine was all right. She lay exhausted but smiling in their bed, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Come meet your son," she said. Ryder approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the red, wrinkled face of his son. Something in his expression cracked, and tears began to roll down his cheeks. "A son. We have a son." "What should we name him?" Catherine asked. "I was thinking Robert, after my father. Robert Samuel Garrett. Robert Samuel. That is perfect." Ryder sat carefully on the edge of the bed and put his arm around Catherine, the three of them forming a circle. "I cannot believe this is real, that you are real, that he is real, that this is my life." "Believe it," Catherine said softly. "This is our life, and it is only beginning." Robert was a healthy baby who grew quickly, his personality emerging as a determined and curious mixture of both his parents. Catherine found motherhood exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Ryder was a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with Robert when he fussed, making silly faces to prompt those first precious smiles, teaching him to ride before he could properly walk by sitting him on the saddle in front of him. The horse breeding business began to take off. Ryder had a reputation for producing well-trained, reliable animals, and buyers came from as far as San Antonio to look at his stock. Catherine managed the financial side of the business, keeping careful records and negotiating prices with a shrewdness that surprised both of them. In 1886, they added 2 more rooms to the house, and Catherine became pregnant again. This time, the labor was easier, and she delivered a daughter in January of 1887. They named her Sarah, after Ryder's lost sister, and Ryder held his infant daughter with tears streaming down his face. "She would have loved to be an aunt," he said. "She would have loved you and loved these babies." "She knows," Catherine said. "Wherever she is, she knows you are happy. She knows you built a good life." "I hope so. God, I hope so." Sarah was quieter than Robert had been, a peaceful baby who seemed content to watch the world with serious eyes. Robert, now a rambunctious 3-year-old, was fascinated by his sister and insisted on helping with everything from diaper changes to feeding. The years flowed by in the way that years do when life is full and purposeful. There were challenges, of course. A drought in 1888 that killed several horses and forced them to sell at a loss. A nasty bout of influenza that swept through the household in 1889, sparing no one. The usual struggles of marriage and parenthood, disagreements about money and child rearing, and how to balance work with family time. But the foundation they had built was strong. Catherine never forgot what it felt like to have her life in pieces, and that memory made her treasure every ordinary moment of the life she and Ryder had created. Ryder never forgot the darkness he had lived in after Sarah's death, and that memory made him grateful every single day for the light Catherine and their children brought into his world. In 1890, Thomas Graham died suddenly of a heart attack, shocking everyone who had assumed the strong rancher was indestructible. At the funeral, Ryder stood with his arm around Martha, who had lost not just her husband but her partner of 25 years. Daniel took over management of the Double T, and while he was competent, he lacked his stepfather's warmth and vision. Martha began spending more time at Ryder and Catherine's house, helping with the children and clearly drawing comfort from their lively household. "You remind me that life continues," Martha said to Catherine one afternoon as they watched Robert and Sarah play in the yard. "That even after loss, there is still joy to be found. Thomas was a good man. He changed the course of both our lives by his generosity. He saw something in Ryder from the first day he showed up looking for work. Said that boy had integrity written all over him. Thomas was right about that, as he was about most things." Catherine squeezed Martha's hand. "You are always welcome here. This is your family too." In 1892, Elizabeth Graham married a rancher from Eagle Pass and moved to his property. Mary surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study nursing and left for training in San Antonio. Eleanor, now 17 and as energetic as ever, spent most of her free time at Catherine and Ryder's house, fascinated by the horse breeding operation and begging to be taught everything they knew. "She has a gift for it," Ryder told Catherine one evening. "She can read horses the way some people read books. If Daniel had any sense, he would make her foreman of the Double T." But Daniel had traditional ideas about women's roles, and Eleanor chafed under his restrictions. When she turned 18 in 1893, she approached Ryder and Catherine with a proposal. "I want to work for you, officially. I can help with the training and the breeding. I know I am young, but I am good at this. You know I am." Ryder looked at Catherine, who nodded. "You are more than good, Eleanor. You are talented. If this is what you want, we would be happy to have you. But you should talk to your mother first. Make sure she understands this is your choice." Martha, when consulted, was not surprised. "That girl has been wild as a Mustang since birth. If she wants to work with horses rather than find a husband, that is her decision. At least she will be with people who care about her." Eleanor moved into a small cabin they built on their property and threw herself into the work with passionate dedication. Her presence allowed the business to expand further. They began breeding not just quarter horses, but also thoroughbred crosses for racing, a lucrative market that required careful attention to bloodlines and training. In 1894, Catherine gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas in honor of Thomas Graham. Robert was now 9, Sarah was 7, and both were fascinated by their new baby brother. The house was always full of noise and activity, and sometimes Catherine felt overwhelmed by the sheer chaos of managing 3 children and a business and a household. But Ryder was always there, sharing the load in ways many men of their time would never consider. He changed diapers and told bedtime stories and helped with homework. He talked to Catherine about his concerns and listened to hers, treating her as the partner she was. Their marriage had deepened over the years, the initial passion settling into something richer and more sustainable, a love built on shared experience and mutual respect. One evening in the spring of 1895, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Ryder and Catherine sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. It had been 13 years since that night at the Harvest Social when they first declared their love. "Do you ever think about how different life could have been?" Ryder asked. "If things had gone according to the original plan?" "You mean, if Philip Thornton had not been killed? If I had actually married him?" "Yes," Catherine shuddered. "It would have been a disaster. Even if he had gone through with the wedding, I would have been trapped in a loveless marriage with a criminal. I would never have known what real partnership feels like. I would never have had you, or these children, or this life. So you do not regret any of it? Not even the waiting and the humiliation?" She turned to look at him fully. "I regret the pain, but I do not regret where it led me. Sometimes I think about that version of Catherine who was sitting in that hotel room, so lost and frightened. I wish I could tell her that everything would work out beyond her wildest dreams, that the best thing that ever happened to her was about to walk through the door." Ryder took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I used to think I did not deserve happiness after what happened to Sarah, that I should spend my life doing penance for not saving her. But loving you taught me that honoring her memory means living fully, not punishing myself. She would want this for me. She would want me to be happy. She would want exactly what you have, a good life, a family, work you love. You have honored her by becoming the man you are." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Inside the house, one of the children called out in sleep, and they heard Eleanor's voice from her cabin, singing as she finished evening chores in the barn. The horses nickered softly in their corrals. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "I love this life we built," Catherine said. "Every difficult, beautiful, ordinary moment of it. So do I, every single moment." The years continued to pass. Robert grew tall and serious, with Ryder's steadiness and Catherine's sharp mind. At 16, he announced he wanted to study engineering and build bridges and roads rather than work with horses. Catherine and Ryder supported his decision, proud of his ambition even though it meant he would eventually leave the ranch. Sarah developed a love of learning that rivaled her mother's, reading everything she could get her hands on and talking about becoming a teacher. Thomas, the youngest, was most like his father, already showing the patience and intuition needed to work with animals. In 1899, Martha Graham died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, surrounded by her children and the family she had helped create. At her funeral, Catherine stood with Ryder and remembered that first day at the Double T Ranch, how Martha had taken her in without judgment and given her a chance to rebuild her life. "She was one of the best people I ever knew," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "She thought the same about you," Eleanor said, now 34 and still working alongside them. "She told me once that bringing you to the ranch was one of God's blessings, that you brought light back into her life after Thomas died." The turn of the century brought changes to West Texas. The open range was being fenced and subdivided, railroads were expanding, and the wild frontier was gradually being tamed into something more settled and organized. Ryder and Catherine adapted with the times, incorporating new breeding techniques and training methods as they learned them. In 1902, Robert left for university in Austin, the first member of either of their families to pursue higher education. Catherine cried when they put him on the train, her firstborn child heading out into the world. Ryder held her that night as she grieved the passage of time. "He will be fine," Ryder assured her. "We raised him to be strong and smart. He will make us proud. I know, but it is hard to let him go." "It is, but that is what we are supposed to do. Love them fiercely, raise them well, and then let them find their own paths." Sarah followed her brother to Austin in 1904, enrolling in a teacher's college despite some skepticism from their more traditional neighbors. Thomas, now 10, was increasingly involved in the horse operation, his natural talent becoming more evident every day. In 1906, Eleanor announced she was engaged to a veterinarian from San Antonio who shared her passion for horses. The wedding was held at Ryder and Catherine's ranch, a joyful celebration that brought together the scattered Graham family and all the friends they had accumulated over the years. Catherine helped Eleanor prepare for her wedding day and remembered her own wedding on a Christmas day so long ago. "Are you nervous?" Catherine asked as she fastened the buttons on Eleanor's dress. "Terrified," Eleanor admitted, "but also excited. David is a good man. We want the same things. I think we will be happy." That is all you can ask for. A partner who shares your values and treats you with respect. The rest you build together, day by day. Like you and Ryder built your life together. Exactly like that. Robert graduated from university in 1907 and took a position with a firm building railroads across Texas. Sarah returned to Del Rio after completing her training and opened a school for girls, determined to provide the kind of education she had received from her mother. Thomas, now 15, was working full-time on the ranch and talking about eventually taking over the breeding operation. Ryder and Catherine were in their 40s now, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But they were healthy and content, surrounded by the life they had built through determination and love. On their 25th wedding anniversary in December of 1907, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch, inviting everyone they had ever known. Ryder stood to make a speech, his voice strong but emotional. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She was supposed to marry someone else. She was supposed to have a completely different life, but fate, or providence, or simple luck brought her to me instead. Every single day since then has been a gift. Catherine, you are my heart, my partner, my best friend. You made me believe I deserved happiness, and then you spent a quarter century proving it to me over and over. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. Catherine was crying openly, but she stood and raised her glass. 25 years ago, I was lost and frightened and convinced my life was over. Then Ryder Garrett walked into a hotel parlor in Del Rio and changed everything. He told me the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. He offered me hope when I had none. He promised me he was not going anywhere, and he has kept that promise every single day since. Ryder, you are the best man I have ever known. You saved me, you loved me, you gave me a family and a home and a purpose. I cannot imagine my life without you, and I thank God every day that Philip Thornton did not show up for our wedding, because that disaster led me straight to you, and you were worth every moment of pain it took to find you. The celebration lasted long into the night, filled with music and laughter and the warmth of family and community. When everyone finally left and they were alone in their bedroom, Ryder pulled Catherine into his arms. 25 years, he marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes I look at you and I'm still that woman in the hotel parlor, seeing you for the first time. Other times, I feel like we have been together for lifetimes. Here is to the next 25 years, Ryder said, kissing her softly. And however many more we are granted after that. The years marched on with increasing speed. In 1910, Robert married a woman he met in Austin, an architect's daughter who shared his passion for building. Sarah met and married a fellow teacher in 1912, settling in Del Rio near her school. Thomas took over primary management of the breeding operation in 1915, allowing Ryder to step back slightly from the day-to-day work. Grandchildren began to arrive, first Robert's son in 1911, then Sarah's daughter in 1913, then a flurry of others as all three of their children built families of their own. The ranch house that had once been just 2 rooms was now a sprawling compound, with additions and outbuildings to accommodate the expanding family when they gathered for holidays and celebrations. In 1920, Ryder and Catherine celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary. They were in their 60s now, their bodies slowing down, but their minds still sharp and engaged. They spent most of their time these days helping Thomas with the business and spoiling their grandchildren, 8 of them now ranging from infancy to 9 years old. One evening, they took their customary walk around the property, a ritual they had maintained for decades. The sunset was particularly beautiful, the sky ablaze with color. They walked hand in hand to the rise where Ryder had first pointed out where their house would stand. So many years ago. "We did well, didn't we?" Catherine said, looking out over the land they had transformed from empty prairie into a thriving ranch. "We did better than well. We did extraordinarily. Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting? All the tiny choices that had to align perfectly for us to find each other?" Ryder pulled her close. "I try not to think about that too much. It terrifies me. But I am grateful for every single one of those choices, even the ones that cause pain. Me too. Especially the moment you decided to ride to Del Rio to find me. That was the choice that changed everything. I am glad I made it. Best decision of my life, excepting only asking you to marry me." They stood together watching the sunset, 2 people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting and true. Behind them, the ranch hummed with life, the legacy they would leave to their children and grandchildren. Ahead of them, whatever years remained, to be lived with the same love and partnership that had sustained them through nearly 4 decades. "I love you, Ryder Garrett," Catherine said, the same words she had spoken so many times over so many years. "I love you, Catherine Garrett. Always have, always will." In 1925, they celebrated their 42nd anniversary, surrounded by 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. The family had become large and boisterous, spanning generations and including people from all walks of life. At the celebration, Robert, now in his 50s, stood to toast his parents. "My mother once told me about the day she met my father. She was at her lowest point, abandoned and alone in a strange town. My father could have walked away. He could have decided her problems were not his concern. But he didn't. He chose to help. He chose to stay. And he chose to love her with everything he had. That choice created all of this." Robert gestured to the assembled family. "Every person in this room exists because my father saw a woman in trouble and decided to do something about it, because my mother had the courage to accept help and build a new life from the ashes of the old one. Their love created this family, this legacy. So here is to Ryder and Catherine Garrett, the finest example of partnership and devotion I have ever witnessed. May we all be so lucky in love." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Catherine leaned against Ryder, overwhelmed by the sight of everyone they had brought into the world, directly or indirectly. This was the future they had built, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of love at a time. Late that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Catherine and Ryder sat on their porch one more time. It was a cold December night, stars brilliant overhead, and they were wrapped in heavy blankets against the chill. "Are you happy, Catherine?" Ryder asked, the same question he had asked so many times over the years. "Happier than I knew was possible," she answered, the same response she always gave. "You?" "Beyond happy, complete, fulfilled, grateful, all of those words and more. We were lucky, weren't we, to find each other, to have all of this. Luck played a part, but so did choice. We chose each other, every day. We chose to work through the hard times. We chose to build something meaningful. That was not luck, Catherine. That was us. She smiled in the darkness. You are right. We did this. Together. Together, he echoed. Always together. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside the house, their family slept, safe and warm. On the land around them, the horses they had bred and raised for decades moved quietly in their corrals. Everything was peaceful. Everything was as it should be. Catherine thought about the young woman she had been, waiting in that Del Rio hotel room for a groom who would never arrive. That woman had been so frightened, so uncertain, so convinced her life was over. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that woman what was coming. That the tragedy she was experiencing was actually the beginning of the greatest blessing of her life. That the man she was waiting for was not the one she was meant to find. That real love was coming, in the form of a cowboy with sad eyes and a kind heart who would promise not to go anywhere and spend 40+ years keeping that promise. What are you thinking? Ryder asked, reading her mood in the way he had learned to do over decades together. I am thinking about promises kept, Catherine said softly. You told me you were not going anywhere. You told me you would wait however long I needed. You told me you would build a life with me. You kept all of those promises, Ryder. Every single one. They were easy promises to keep. You made them easy. That is not true. Life was hard. We struggled. There were moments when it would have been easier to give up. Maybe, but giving up on you was never an option. Not then, not now, not ever. Catherine turned to kiss him, her husband of 42 years, her partner in every sense of the word. I am so glad you came to find me that day. I am so glad you were brave enough to tell me the truth and offer me a way forward. I am so glad you love me. I am glad for all of those things too. But mostly, I am just glad you exist. That somewhere in this big world, you were born and you lived, and you ended up in Del Rio at exactly the moment when I could find you. That feels like more than luck. That feels like destiny. Maybe it was. Maybe we were always meant to find each other. I like to think so. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, reluctant to end this perfect moment. But there would be other moments, other evenings, other chances to sit together and marvel at the life they had built. They had been granted the greatest gift two people can receive: time. Time to know each other, to grow together, to create something lasting. In bed that night, Catherine curled against Ryder's warmth, listening to his steady breathing as he drifted towards sleep. She thought about all the versions of herself she had been: the lost woman in the hotel, the uncertain newcomer to the ranch, the bride on Christmas Day, the new mother, the business partner, the grandmother. All of those women had been her, but they had all been shaped by the man beside her. He had seen potential in her when she had seen only failure. He had offered partnership when she had expected subservience. He had given her love when she had thought herself unlovable. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? Ryder murmured, not quite asleep. For everything. For showing up. For staying. For loving me so well. His arm tightened around her. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me after you had been betrayed, for building this life with me. I love you, Catherine. I love you too. Always. They drifted into sleep, two people who had beaten the odds to find each other, to make a life together, to create something beautiful from what had seemed like disaster. The ranch slept around them, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they chose each other, day after day, year after year, for a lifetime. The story that had begun with abandonment and betrayal had transformed into something magnificent. Catherine had waited for a groom who never arrived, but she had found something infinitely better, a cowboy who promised he was not going anywhere, and who had kept that promise through 4 decades of joy and struggle and love. It was not the story she had expected to live, but it was the story she was meant to have, and she would not have changed a single moment of it. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the beginning, with all its pain and confusion, but the middle and the ending, full of love and partnership and family. Catherine Harper, who had become Ryder Garrett on a Christmas day long ago, had learned the most important lesson of all. that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as disasters, and that the right person is worth every moment of waiting, even when you are waiting for someone else entirely. And Ryder Garrett, who had once thought he did not deserve happiness, had learned that love could redeem even the deepest guilt, and that showing up for someone, day after day, was the truest form of devotion. Together, they had created a legacy that would outlast them both, a testament to the power of choosing love, choosing partnership, and choosing to stay no matter what challenges arose. Their children would tell their story to their grandchildren, and those grandchildren would tell it to their children, and the tale of how a bride was abandoned but found true love with a cowboy who refused to leave would become part of the family mythology, inspiring generations to come. But for now, on this cold December night in 1925, they simply slept. Two people who had found each other against all odds and had lived the promise of happily ever after, not as a fairy tale ending, but as a daily choice to love and be loved. And in the morning, they would wake together, as they had done for 42 years, ready to face another day side by side, partners in every sense of the word, still as in love as they had been on that harvest social evening when they first admitted their feelings. The story had a happy ending after all, just not the one anyone could have predicted. And that, Catherine often thought in her later years, was the beauty of it. Life rarely went according to plan, but sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, it went somewhere even better.